What's up, football fans? Welcome into the CONCACAF studios here. Tyler Terrence along with Devin Kerr, and welcome to the first Scotiabank Concacaf League show of the new year of 2020. A happy new year to you and yours back at home. I have a question for you all, though. Are you starting to get the chills? You got a bit of a headache, having trouble sleeping at night? It might just be the CONCACAF Champions League fever. Good news is we have the remedy. The bad news is that Devin Kerr actually had to fend off the flu a couple weeks ago. He had his wisdom teeth out a couple days ago. He's a bit of a mess, but we're really excited about the tournament that's ahead.
I was having hot flashes, but I was actually sick, very, very sick.
Yeah.
Got my wisdom teeth out.
I was worried.
The end of the year in 2019 and the start of 2020 has not been very kind to one Devin Kerr. You know what's awesome? It's all done.
It's done.
Now we have CONCACAF Champions League. 16 teams. The champions of champions. Let's get it going.
Let's get it going. Let's take a look at the 16 participants. Of course, we're going to have our 4 teams from Mexico, 4 teams from American Major League Soccer, our Canadian side, Montreal Impact, 6 from Scotiabank Concacaf League, and of course, our participants from the Caribbean in Portmore United. There's a look at the bracket proper, a number of just mouth-watering fixtures in the round of 16. One to keep an eye on for sure is LAFC and Club Leon, as MLS sides didn't exactly get the favorable draw that they were looking for. But let's forget MLS teams for a second. Let's talk about south of the border and Mexican teams, because there are some serious squads here who are looking to do some damage. Teams that you're certainly familiar with in years past and what they've been able to do, and just huge names. Club America and Tigres, to name a couple of them. They finished in second place in the regular season in both the Apertura and Clausures, respectively. And then they end up taking down the 2 teams that are below them. Club America beating Cruz Azul in the final, and then, of course, it was Tigres taking down Club Leon. Tigres have been to the last 3 or 4 finals. Club America, Miguel Herrera have a lot to prove. He shot his mouth off a little bit in 2018, saying he didn't need to worry about MLS teams, Toronto FC, Sebastian Giovinco, who? Well, he got a full dose of that and then some. But, Devin, I want to ask you this question, not necessarily the favorite, because we've gotten into that before, and I think that a lot of people can agree that Tigres, in terms of Mexican teams, probably have the best chance of advancing. But for the folks at home, any Mexican team that you're worried about maybe in the round of 16 in their opening match?
I'm worried about 2, actually. It's easy to look at the Mexican teams and say they're the favorites, and I would agree with that. But I want to look at Club America and Cruz Azul. Cruz Azul was the team for me that was going to be the dark horse. They finished 12th in the Apertura. That's not exactly the momentum that you're looking for coming in. And how about Club America? You just talked about Herrera and running his mouth a little bit too much. What's the next step? They made some noise in Liguilla, but now when they're going forward, this is time for them to get back to that world power where they just seemingly beat everybody. They haven't really been themselves, and it's time to get back to winning ways. They've taken the baby steps, but now they're looking for that giant leap.
Well, Mexican teams have certainly been dominating this tournament for basically as long as we can remember in the modern format, still waiting for a Major League Soccer team to take the crown, still waiting for an American Major League Soccer team to get to the final. Last time that happened, it was Real Salt Lake, and Garth Lagerwey was in charge in the front office. And he's in charge of the Seattle Sounders, of course, and they're our first participant from Major League Soccer, reigning MLS champions, beating Toronto FC in the third of that trilogy between those 2 terrific sides. Seattle Sounders last participation, they got knocked out by Chivas in the second round. Who could forget Jordan Morris tearing his ACL against Santa Tecla, but he came back bigger, better, and stronger than ever. Let's head over to Los Angeles. All the glitz, glamour, and spang-dangle that Carlos Vela, Bob Bradley, and LAFC are bringing to MLS. They're now going to bring it into Scotiabank Concacaf Champions League. They set all sorts of records in 2019 in the regular season. Let's go across the coast, 3,000 miles to the Big Apple. They don't know where they're playing their games yet, but they will be playing under new manager in Ronnie Dyla. We'll have much more on that later on in the show, but NYCFC, who have been ousted in the Eastern Conference semifinals every time they've gotten to the playoffs, are going to be looking to take a step in Champions League for the first time. Atlanta United, the 5 stripes, a lot of movement in the offseason. We'll have more on that as well. Joseph Martinez and company are going to be in the tournament by way of winning the U.S. Open Cup under Frank de Boer, who is going to be in his second year of managing Atlanta United. And, of course, we have our 1 participant from Canada and from Major League Soccer in the Montreal Impact under new tutelage themselves in former Arsenal and Barcelona and World Cup winner France and Thierry Henry. They get in by beating Toronto FC in penalties in the Canadian Championship. A rough year to be Toronto FC, losing in the final Canadian Championship, losing in the final of MLS Cup. I'm not going to ask you who you're worried about in MLS, because I think a lot of MLS fans are usually worried about teams heading into this tournament and worried about all of them. Who do you like as a favorite for MLS to maybe get the furthest?
I would have said LAFC. Unfortunately, their draw with Leon and being in pot 2, it gave them a little bit of a twist. And then my next favorite would have been Atlanta United. Of course, some roster movements.
A lot of movement today.
That's moved some stuff around. I think the easy one is Seattle Sounders. A bit old, a lot to do, but Garth Lagerwey. He's a successful guy, and it's hard to bet against him.
Well, the last participation that we had for CONCACAF and club tournaments was Scotiabank Concacaf League, and let's take a look at the teams that got in by way of that tournament. You're looking at the quarterfinals here. 6 out of the 8 teams that participated in the quarterfinals made their way into Scotiabank Concacaf Champions League. Olimpia Comunicaciones, Saprissa, Motagua, Alianza, San Carlos, and of course Motagua, all getting in by way of the new tournament and the new format, which produced some mighty fine football. Saprissa and Motagua played an instant classic. In the final would be Saprissa, who ended up hoisting the trophy. Motagua watched the opposition hoist the trophy for a second year in a row, but they do get into Champions League. And we saw Caja Independiente in 2019 make some noise, take down reigning finalists in Toronto FC a year ago. Is there a team out of this bunch, and I feel like I know your answer, I feel like a lot of people at home know your answer, to be completely honest, that you'd like to make some noise that are going to be in Pot 2 coming out of CONCACAF League?
It's the easy answer because it's the smart answer. This isn't an educated guess. This is just common sense. It's Saprissa. And it's Saprissa all day because of that swagger that they're starting to get back. This is a team, remember, everything in Central America ran through the Purple Giants forever. The 90s, the early 2000s. Walter Centeno back at the helm, their storied player. Remember, he won this competition before they did the rebrand back in 2005. 34 domestic titles. At this point in time, coming off the CONCACAF League Championship, they are 100% the favorites.
Well, those are our 16 teams that are set in stone. We have so much more to talk about. When we come back, we're going to take a look at some really controversial, contradictory comments coming out of Seattle Sounders camp, Atlanta United transfer talk, and so much more. Don't move a muscle. Beasley on the first time for the timeless man.
Birds running down the middle. Oh, from a difficult angle, Correa has scored for Santos. Header snap, bar down. Somehow that stayed out from Rios. This ball floating, and a touch from Torres, not enough to keep this out.
Shea on the first time. Physic ball, Martinez! Atlanta with a goal in the first 50 seconds. Here's Pabon on the other end, Mealy off his line, and Pabon tucks it away. Monterrey against the run of play.
Flip 1 second effort, Curly, and a nice save by Guerra.
Marco again, good ball in, not in header, Gonzalez Perez.
Sanchez steps up, it's saved by Garcia. Remarkable swing of momentum for Monterrey. Moro crossing, header is in. That's a first. Low, there's Wright Phillips laying it off, Royer! Red Bulls have erased their deficit in less than 9 minutes. Oh my goodness, it's in from beyond midfield. Monterrey and Tigres meeting for this second leg. Drag him a bit wider than he wanted. 3-striped shirts, down goes Pizarro. Well, this could be the moment for Monterrey. Sanchez, right down the middle. 2-goal lead for Monterrey. Gignac! Instant classic! Monterrey win the Champions League! Tigres meeting for this second leg. Three-striped shirts, down goes Pizarro. Oh, this could be the moment for Monterrey. Sanchez, right down the middle. 2-goal lead for Monterrey. Gignac! Seconds left. Baravero has it in his hands. Instant classic. Monterrey win the Champions League.
The draw for the 2020 Scotiabank Concacaf Champions League. 16 teams, the best teams in CONCACAF, learning their fate tonight.
What's the most exciting for the upcoming season?
Obviously, there's a lot riding for a lot of teams, right? For the MLS to conquer this title is paramount. For the teams in Central America, for the team coming from Jamaica, there's a lot to prove that they can compete at this level. For Liga MX, it's about continuing to dominate. What we like to see is the diversity, what the clubs are bringing to the table, and the importance they're putting on this competition.
These competitions are competitions that we want to be a part of, and we have worked hard to be here, and we are very privileged to be here. And this is a great opportunity for them to come and display that talent to the best of their ability.
If I had to pick one team from MLS, I think LAFC is going to have a good run.
We played for keep. We are in it to win it.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the 2020 Scotiabank Concacaf Champions League draw. The first team coming out, Cruz Azul. Cruz Azul position in the bracket, A3. And it's going to be LAFC participating for the first time. It's going to be A4.
Tigres.
And this is Tigres, one of the most successful teams in Liga MX. We have 3 more teams left in Pot 2. Alianza to face Tigres. The last team coming out, Pot 2, Club León. They should be facing LAFC. There you have it, the matchups for the round of 16 of the Scotiabank Concacaf Champions League. We hope for a great tournament.
All the stars were certainly out in Mexico City about a month ago for the draw for the 2020 Scotiabank Concacaf Champions League. Devin was actually there too. He's not part of the stars list that I'm referencing, but no.
Don't get the red carpet treatment.
No,
they
the red
me
carpet
in the
was
back door.
there. You just happened to walk through a different exit. Let me ask you this question: what was the experience like, just in general?
Amazing. It was brief, unfortunately. It's a good problem to have when you're working a lot, but I wasn't there long enough. Mexico City and Mexico in general, beautiful country. Unfortunately, did not get to spend enough time. Worked my butt off, which is a great thing. I wish I could have eaten more. I got one really good meal in, but it was at 1 o'clock in the morning when I was catching a 4 a.m. flight. I only put down about 7 tacos, and that's
rookie numbers.
That's subpar for me. I usually bring it in pretty heavy, but another day.
Let's jump right into it because there were some interesting comments coming out of Seattle Sounders camp that we talked about right before we went to break, specifically coming from Garth Lagerwey. And there was a really interesting piece from our friends over at The Athletic, and specifically Matt Pence, putting together. And we'll take a look at it. We're going to take a run to win that competition, Lagerwey said. Then, in the same breath, referenced Toronto and Kansas City's CONCACAF Champions League inspired swoons and how the Sounders were going to have to be careful to avoid similar pitfall. Though Lagerwey has annoyed a portion of the fan base before by talking about the need to prioritize certain competitions, which some supporters read as downgrading the Open Cup, he returned to that message on Tuesday. We have to be efficient and effective about conserving our energy, Lagerwey said. But this is very different from what he said down in Mexico City.
Look, it's a tournament that's very important to us. Seattle's, I believe, been in the tournament 6 times. I think they've had as much success as any MLS team in the history of the tournament. And to go back to my previous club in 2011 with RSL, we went to the final. So, I think it's a tournament that's very, very important to us. I don't want to diminish that. I just wanted to highlight some of the practical complications we have where we don't know what all our contracts can be right now. But we're going to go for this with Seattle.
Are you a bit confused? Do you not know to make heads or tails of it? What's going on? We're asking all the same questions. And what is going on? What Garth Lagerwey seems to be talking in 2 different camps right now. What do you make of this?
It's very confusing, and I want to go back to some of the specific verbiage that he uses where he says we're going to get after it. We're going to go after this competition. But we have to prioritize our competitions. Maybe this team has gotten a little bit long in the tooth. They need to find a way to, maybe we don't use all of our assets up front. but then says this is a very important tournament to us. And he also goes on to say, and it's not shown there in the quote, nor does he say in the video, but he says that they're going to use summertime signings. Think about that verbiage. To help jolt this team through the rest of their competitions. You hit summertime, this competition's over. So you don't have the luxury. What I do see out of him is him kind of hedging his bets a little bit, saying, I'm going to do this, but still look at my shiny thing over here. We're capable of both. He's just giving himself an alleyway to get out. And one thing that I want to talk to you about is when you take a look at the roster composition, and this is why I say he kind of hedges his bets, let's take a look at who was guaranteed to be on the roster then. Things have changed since then. Trey Muse, not your starting goalkeeper, not going to be the one to change games. Obviously, some things have changed there. Nuhu, that's, again, not a game changer. The one that you could make argument for is Hanuala Bawana. Coming along nicely, continuing to develop him, getting him some more repetitions. Everybody else is just, it's not the game changer. Justin Dillon, with all due respect, not going to happen. Campo Chavez, not going to happen.
This is more or less
Ruiz
Tacoma Defiance, USL Championship Division 2, yeah.
These aren't the guys that are going to change the game for you. When you don't know what your team is going to look like, how am I supposed to sit there as a general manager and say, we're capable of doing this? He doesn't know. That's why he goes both ways.
Well, you can't blame him because it has always been so difficult for MLS managers, sporting directors, general managers to try to put this together and try to prioritize. So while it is confusing, we do understand, and it's so difficult for these Major League Soccer teams to try to prioritize and try to figure out how to be successful in all competitions. Let's talk about Atlanta United for a second, because this is a group that obviously a lot of people expect a lot from at this point in time. You win MLS Cup, you win US Open Cup, you have big South American names on your roster, you have a terrific manager in Frank DeBoer, who's now in his second full season. But for Atlanta United, there has just been a slew of movement, including today. And of course, Julian Gressel, as most of you probably know by now, is going over to DC United for what's being reported on around $1 million. He was on about $133,000, about 4 cents short of that. And when you look at Julian Gressel, LGP, and now, of course, Darlington Nagbe, all on the outs, 3 major pieces of their MLS Cup winning and US Open Cup winning rosters, where does Atlanta United go from here?
It's real easy for fans when I start to pick out 2 players to criticize me and what I'm going to say, but here's why. We're giving you a brief synopsis of what's going on with these teams. We're going to get into the matchups and dive deeper. For me, 2 names stick out. It's Nagbe, because that's your general in the middle of the field, the guy who gives you the ability to segue from back to front. He maintains shape. He does everything. And then it's got to be Michael Parkhurst. And I say that because he's retired. That's your captain. A guy who, was he blazing things off in the starting 11? No, his glory days were over. But there is something about a confidence from your general who runs this team start to finish. When you don't have that, you start to question it. I'm going to give you an example. I witnessed it firsthand. Semifinal of the U.S. Open Cup against Orlando City. They're on the road. The tournament that gave them the opportunity to get into this competition. They bring Barco off. There is absolute anarchy from a lot of the Latin American, Central American players on the sideline. That did not go over very well with anybody within the team. Why? You don't need to have those conversations mid-game. What did Frank DeBoer and Orlando Trustful do? They pulled everybody off the bench. They sent everybody down to the sideline, almost like a little kid skulking in the corner. Michael Parkhurst took them by their shirt, and he said, no, we're not going to do that. Let's get this going. Those conversations are reserved for after a match or in the dressing room during a match, not for mid-match. Who steps up now? Who's the one who now steps up? Boys, we can't behave that way. We got to get going. With all due respect, when I look at the roster right now, I don't see a player that sticks out.
Well, from a leadership standpoint, from a tactical standpoint, especially with Julian Gressel not getting the money he deserved from Atlanta United, DC United says thank you very much. They just tweeted out a few minutes ago, pleasure doing business with you. It is going to be a pleasure because Julian Gressel is a heck of a player, and he's going to do great things in our nation's capital for DC United. But when you talk about Frank DeBoer, he stepped into this tournament in his first competition with Atlanta United last year, did fairly well, not great. And we have a couple of managers that are stepping into a similar situation in both Montreal and New York City. Let's start with Montreal, and it's a name that everybody is familiar with. It's a household football name from a playing standpoint, and it's, of course, Thierry Henry. It makes a lot of sense in terms of the signing in the French market in Montreal, and they're really excited to have him. As you can see, he's an absolute superstar. You think about what he did as a player, finishing in second in Ballon d'Or voting in 2003, finishing second only to Pavel Nedved. But when you think about what he did as a manager, what he's done as a manager, his resume is small, and it is not sparkling by any stretch of the imagination. With Monaco, he was 4-5-11. Of course, he was an assistant with Belgium in the most recent World Cup under Roberto Martinez. They get to a semifinal. They fall short to his own country in France by a score of 1-0, who, of course, go on to win it. But for Thierry Henry, a lot of question marks in terms of what he can accomplish off the field as a manager, not necessarily what he can do as a player, because we're all well aware of what he accomplished at Arsenal, Barcelona, and winning a World Cup in France. Now let's talk about NYCFC and the Big Apple, because they feel like they found their guy to take this NYCFC side into a new stratosphere. That's not only performing well in MLS postseason, but of course now they're going to have the chance to test their mettle against the continent and of course beyond the continent, the region's best at the club level. And Ronny Deila has been deemed the Norwegian Jurgen Klopp. That is mighty praise considering what Jurgen Klopp is doing with Liverpool right now, who is deemed probably the best team in Europe in recent memory. Deila has won a Norwegian Football Cup. He was a two-time Scottish Premiership winner, as well as a Scottish League Cup winner as well. But Ronny Deila did a great job at Vålerenga after his time at Celtic, has his work cut out with him for NYCFC. And Devin, I know you and I have talked about it a lot in terms of roster with NYCFC, Thierry Henry, what that's going to look like for Montreal. I don't even know where you want to start. So I'm just going to pose the question to you. Go whatever direction you want.
It's a gift you don't often give them.
Nope.
Let's go with Montreal Impact and Thierry Henry, because I feel like there was a lot of negative press about him, which I can understand. But let's take a look at his resume in terms of player to coach and where that's going now. Obviously, as a player, we know what he did with Arsenal. We know what he did with Barcelona. When he came stateside with New York Red Bull, wondrous things. And from a managerial standpoint, all you heard were the glorious things that went on as an assistant under Belgium. And you talked about that. One game shy of going to the World Cup final, losing to the eventual champions 1-0 France. Goes to Monaco. Failed experiment. Is it his fault? Give him another chance. How many coaches throughout their entire career have fallen flat on their face? He just happened to do it out the gate as the first time as a head of the team. That's not necessarily his fault. He needs to continue to get cycles and get repetitions just like a player and anybody else. Great players don't always make great coaches and vice versa, but he has to be given a chance. You take a look at this organization, no manager has ever had a winning record. That says something right there.
There's been some good managers
I'm not calling out Montreal Impact. I'm just saying that tells you right now. 3 years in a row, they missed the playoffs. And oh, by the way, when you run through the managers, let's just give you a little heads up. Frankie Klopas, failed experiment, that's fine. Remy Gard, up and down, okay. Wilmer Cabrera, we saw what he did a little bit. The only reason they're in this tournament is because of Wilmer Cabrera, by the way, winning the Canadian Championship. And oh, by the way, who got him started? Jesse Marsch. How's that working out for you? I think he's doing just fine. So if they give him a little bit of time, the organization said down at the draw, they're all in. They're ready for this, and they want to go from the youth level all the way up to the senior team and make a run at this thing.
How about Ronny Deila and NYCFC?
Great hire. I think it's a great hire. I love what this organization has done so far, Eastern Conference champions. They're another team, much like LAFC, who's put on some good football. They're ready to take the next step. I'm worried about their depth in the middle of the field. I think their starting three is amazing. Maxi Morales, James Sands, Alexander Ring. They're great, but what does the depth look like? You've brought Keaton Parks back in. Gain Zelalem, he's 22 years old. You brought him over from Arsenal. He goes to Sporting KC. Again, another failed experiment. What do you do when that starting three starts to fall off a little bit? What's the continued development of James Sands? And my last question to them is, much like Atlanta United on the field, NYCFC off the field, no more Claudio Reyna. Leaves, he goes to Austin. And rumblings behind the scenes, doesn't matter where it came from, where they weren't going to spend enough to Claudio Reyna's liking, talking about the ownership group, to help him make that next step. So he jumped ship. Who off the field is going to point them in the right direction now?
Well, debutants for NYCFC in this tournament, Montreal Impact. Last time they were actually in this competition, they got to the final and fell to Cruz Azul in 2014-15. Last team to make it to the final from MLS, with the exception of Toronto FC, of course, in 2018. We're going to step aside one more time, but when we come back, we'll take a look at the 2019 tournament. We'll take a look at the top 5 moments, and I'll give you a hint here on number 1. It's not a goal, and it's not Monterrey hoisting the trophy. Stick around and find out. Welcome back into the CONCACAF studios. Tyler Terrence along with my main man, Devin Kerr. And while we always want to focus on the here and the now and keep our feet on the ground and focus on the 2020 Scotiabank Concacaf Champions League, we have to pay homage to those who came before us in the 2019 tournament, had some unbelievable moments. Let's dive right into it and take a look at the top 5. Devin, I put this list together myself. Let's see if you agree with it. Let's start out with Monterrey, the eventual champions. This is a huge moment for me because Nico Sanchez steps up to the penalty spot. Second leg, it's 0-0 between Monterrey and Alianza. He already missed a penalty earlier in the game. If Nico Sanchez doesn't bury this and it goes to penalties, who knows what would have happened, but Sanchez buries it, Monterrey go on to win.
He no longer has the luxury of Diego Alonso giving him the shout to step up to the spot again. Here's a word of advice. Don't miss the first one, and you won't be in that situation. It's not a great penalty, by the way. That's why it's number 5.
Well, number 4 is a goal that is just mouth-watering. It's a jaw-dropper. You stop what you're doing and you watch it 17 more times. And speaking of 17, the score at this point between Sporting Kansas City and Monterrey was about 17-2 on aggregate. And this goal had no effect whatsoever on the result. But Miguel Layún, my goodness, if there's an exclamation point to any match in any football game, I mean, this is it.
Watch the ball bend. And it bends. This is one where you catch it, put it right down on the ground, catches it right on the valve because it's got the perfect amount of swerve, but it's not a lot of rotation on the ball itself. Watch this, upper corner, just tuck things away. That's just one of those ones. You walk away and you're, that's right, boys. Add insult to injury. How about it? It
was a tough night to be a Sporting Kansas City fan, for sure, and then the MLS season was not kind to them either. And Toronto FC, the reigning finalists from a year ago in 2018-2019, a world of a different story. Kai Independiente thrashed them 5-1 on aggregate, by far our biggest upset of the competition. It was 4-0 after the first leg. This was not a good look for Toronto.
What's worse, the fact that you lose 4-0, the fact that you lose 5-1, or that you draw at home against them? Honest question.
All of it's bad.
It's all bad. It's all bad. This is, look, the entire back line standing, and this was just an uninspired team. They were tired. It's a beautiful ball, and watch, celebration. No shirt, no shoes. Toronto's got problems, though. Oh, that's right. They're not in the competition this year.
Speaking of problems, I have a problem with this goal here from Andre Pierre-Gignac in the second leg of the final. This is to make it 2-1. I don't have a problem with the quality because the quality is unbelievable.
Mad that he does it.
Why doesn't he bring it down? This is obscene. They needed this goal to make it a game, and he just decides to do that. He could have taken 2 touches.
Tyler, that's, a former great player myself. That's what we do.
Do what you want.
Great moments. You do what you want. Yeah, it's a beautiful finish in the bottom corner. The problem is we need more of this.
Yes.
Fans, don't forget, he only played in the competition
till the
final. Played both legs of the final, scored this beautiful goal, trying to get the comeback going. They're going to need a bit more if they want to get that done. Remember, lost 3 out of the last 4.
We told you number 1 was not going to be generic. It was not going to be somebody hoisting a trophy or a banger from midfield, but rather, let's give some love to a man who needs it. Jose Guerra put on one of the all-time great goalkeeping performances in this competition's history. He made not 1, not 2, not 3, but 10 saves. It was 2-1 to Independiente heading into the second leg. He kept this game scoreless until the 74th minute. It was laughable, not only how good Jose Guerra was, but the poor finishing from Sporting Kansas City. I mean, Graham Zusi, Johnny Russell, everybody was denied, including your uncle, your aunt, your cousin, second removed. I mean, this is a ridiculous performance.
The last 3 or 4, especially the one off Guerra's face, and then the set piece in the upper 90, beautiful saves. But I'm with you on that. How bad was the finishing itself? I mean, sitting right in front of goal, quality sitters. Johnny Russell one time actually goes to play it back across net. You can't figure out if he's pinging it to the far post, trying to just knock one off like a domino effect, or if he's actually trying to put it on frame. Regardless, you have to do much better, and that's just when you hang it there. Got you $1. Come get it. Giving you hope and thinking that you're going to have a comeback. Instead, they got smacked around.
Well, here's to seeing many more goalkeeping performances like Jose Guerra's in the 2020 Scotiabank Concacaf Champions League. We're going to be right back here in the CONCACAF studios, same time, Friday night, 5 o'clock. You can start your weekend off well, or you can come and tune in with us. But first, don't go anywhere because we have our first 90 in 60. We're going to take a look back at last year's first leg of the Clásico Regio final between Tigres and Monterrey. Folks, thank you so much for tuning in. We'll talk to you soon.
Football We could say that for us,
Pour nous, para nosotros,
on this side of the world, football is our life, the game of our lives. Football always comes first. We all come from different cultures, but football unites us.
sin enviar su examen, nos une.
One region, one voice.
Una voz. One voice. Une voix.
If we listen closely, we are born ready to shout. And from there, we start to play with intensity until the last minute. Faced with obstacles, we work through them. We will improve day by day, always forward, making football better everywhere, every match. Our passion is so strong that it breaks down borders, even those that are hard to knock down, for all of us to reach our dreams. We are the region where the game comes first, bringing the game closer to our fans, and decisions are always made for the good of the sport. We raise our level every day, making football better everywhere, every match. We will put all our teams in position to win in our region.
Nuestra región. Nuestra región.
Everyone gets to play, connected and respected. One region.
Una región.
Una región. Una región.
Together, we are the collective best of our individual cultures. We are millions of souls. We are together for the love of our game. United for football. 41 countries for one love. CONCACAF. Love for our game.
At the start of the 2019 Scotiabank Concacaf Champions League, we had 16 teams hailing all across North America, Central America, and the Caribbean. And wouldn't you know it, when we're down to 2 teams, it is the 2 sides who are just about 25 minutes apart from each other in Monterrey, Mexico, as it is Tigres playing host to Rayados in the first leg of the 2019 Scotiabank Concacaf Champions League final. Tyler Terrence along with Juan Arango, thank you so much for joining us and for tuning in what should be a historic match and a Clásico Regio with an electric atmosphere. Pitch conditions for tonight, a slight chance of rain, 76 degrees, but nothing that should prohibit us from getting these 90 minutes in ahead. Juan, it cannot be understated enough. This is going to be an absolute bloodbath in terms of the pride, the passion, and just the downright plain fact that these 2 teams don't like each other. How much does it mean, not only to the players, but to the fans?
And it's not just the passion and the blood and the guts and the tears and everything else. It's saying we're number one, we're the best, we have the history, we've beaten you before, we want to beat you again. And you see that because Diego Alonso said it yesterday during the press conference. This is going to be tight. It's going to come down to little things as far as the differences between one team and the next.